You've reached the Hollier helpline. We turn the holidays into Holliers.
Hi, my family's going apple picking this weekend, but in these old clothes, we look more Granny Smith than Big Apple.
Just go to Old Navy.
Old Navy?
Yep, Old Navy's going big with 50% off all jeans, 50% off all sweaters, and 50% off all outerwear for your whole family.
50% off all jeans, sweaters, and outerwear?
But hurry, the sale ends Sunday in stores and at OldNavy.com.
How about them apples? Kids, we're going to Old Navy.
Turn your holiday into a Hollier. Get to Old Navy today. Valid 11/10 to 11/12. Excludes in-store clearance.
Happy New Year. Well, welcome back. A little early. Everything's a little early. How was everybody's Halloween? This is the Supernatural Substation. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Eileen Pistanio, and my co-host Bernadine is in the Peanut Gallery. Say hey, Bernadine.
Hey.
It is the 3rd of November. A Hawaiian girl bobblehead. Isn't that right there? Oh, and Zeke, he's keeping me company as usual. So anyway, how was your Halloween, Bernadine?
It was awesome. We actually did an investigation.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about until. Oh, let me just say at the top of the show, the producer, Bernadine, we have our guest, Michelle Belanger, and everybody, she needs no introduction. We'll be coming on around 9:30 in about a half hour. I guess you'll keep me just informed of what's going on and what time it is even, It's like, oh, okay, it's 10 after 9. Anyway, so yeah, you had an investigation at the radio station.
Yes.
Where was that? Where is it at?
That was in Eunice, Louisiana.
Eunice, okay. I was going to say Erath, but I couldn't remember.
No.
So yeah, I mean, I saw the clip of you on TV and all this stuff. And so tell us what went on, and like, do you have any evidence yet?
Not yet. I still have to go through some EVPs and all. I just took our handheld devices because it was actually on a Sunday before Halloween. Mm-hmm. So my team worked on Monday. So it was actually me and my cousin Danny, which is a medium. Mm-hmm. We went, and they had the Fox News, a couple of girls from there filming us. Mm-hmm. During the investigation. We stayed there. Well, they stayed there till like 2 o'clock in the morning. But me and Danny spent the night there because we're not afraid.
Yeah. What's the story? What's the story behind the place? What's the radio station?
The radio station is KBON, KBON. Mm-hmm. It's downtown, so it's one of the oldest buildings. Yeah. And they really don't know much history on it because they can't find much at the courthouse, I guess. But what are you doing?
Me?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Okay.
My cat is yowling in the back.
So when we went in, they don't tell us anything. Mm-hmm. But we actually did an investigation there in 2012. So they asked us back. Mm-hmm. And in 2012, we actually captured 22 EVPs.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have to say, one of the EVPs was exactly like one of the EVPs we captured this time, which is a man calling the host a B word.
Oh, you mean a bitch?
Yeah. Didn't know if I could say it here, but yeah.
Yeah. And online.
He's one that stays in a specific room.
Now, isn't that the? Let me just back up a little bit. Isn't that the nighttime host, the girl?
Yes.
Who? What? She's on from like a 9 to something, or I can't remember the time, but she's there late. She's there late,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Christy Daly.
Yeah. So she's there
Yeah,
alone and late, and there's a guy
she's been
calling her a
there.
bitch.
Yeah, she's been there a long time, but like we explained to her back in those days, which
Mm.
we feel he's from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
We feel he actually has something in a wall. Like Danny picked that up, that he has something hidden in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't like women coming in the room. He doesn't like women, period. He feels like we speak too much, maybe because back in his time, women were seen and not heard, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we're just a little wild for him now, I guess. So he's angry. But when we started, when they were doing my interview, the lady from Fox, she was actually filming me, and they use these big square LED lights.
Mm-hmm.
They have like one big square, and it's a bunch of little lights in it. Well,
Right.
these are very strong batteries, and she has two of them on me, one on my left side, one on my right side. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm explaining to her because she asked me, you know, well, how do spirits get their energy? So I was explaining to her that they have this big, massive power plant when you go into the town, and the town is small.
Mm-hmm.
So they have that, plus in the radio station, there's tons of electronics. So I said
Yeah.
they pull from that, they pull from lights. And right when I said that, half of that light on one side, and you could see it go dark on one side of my face, went out. So she's
I
like,
was
"Oh my God,
I
oh
was
my God, oh
wondering. I
my God,
watched
oh
the
my God."
footage. Yeah, I watched the
I'm like,
footage, and you're like sitting in the dark, and I'm like, I can't
I
see.
I look over. That's
Mm-hmm.
why, because the light was half dead. So we continue the interview. You know, I calmed her down because she was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." You know, that shouldn't happen. I'm like, calm down. It's okay. Then a little further into the interview, I'm explaining again how they draw the energy from batteries and, you know, us, you know, just
Mm-hmm.
things like that. The rest of the light goes out. Like, that never has happened to me. And I mean, yeah, she was freaking out. So we had to end the interview because she didn't have enough light on me. And that one light on the other side wasn't enough to cover, you know, both sides of me.
Mm-hmm. So
So
mission
she,
accomplished, right?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so she, and then that room I was telling you with the guy, before we even got started, we had the light on in that room. Well, he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
like the light on or the door open or
Mm-hmm.
women to enter. So we had the light on, and we went in there. We walk out, the light switches are still on, but he turns the lights out. With the lights, they have two light switches for that room because it's pretty big. Both the light switches are hooked up like they're supposed to be, but the lights are off. And
Mm-hmm.
nothing we do is helping. You know, it doesn't come on. So I asked her to go and check the breaker box because maybe the breaker tripped just for that room. She
Mm-hmm.
goes and checks. She's like, no, everything is fine. So we're like, okay, well, give it a while. You know, let's leave the room and all. We come back in a little while. The lights are back on. And the door is closed. He doesn't like the door open.
So he's in
Yeah.
there with the lights on and the doors closed,
Yeah.
and
So
no women inside.
and no women. But when we go to do an EVP session later on that night, we're asking him questions. Well, when Christy starts to ask him questions, she starts to call him out about, you know, I guess the bad stuff he does.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, bitch. And I'm like, okay.
Oh well.
Yeah, because we have like our EVP recorders, you can't hear what they're saying until we do the analyzing.
Right.
But
Right.
I have radios that actually pick up the spirits' voices at the time they're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh yeah, I'm like, did you just hear that? She's like, yes,
Pack it up.
yeah.
Time to go.
So yeah, it was a pretty interesting night, and Danny picked up quite a few things. You know, he
Yeah, I
picked up
saw
the little
I
girl
saw
that was
they
there.
interviewed him. Yeah,
And
and he said something about the man too, though. At least on the clip that I saw.
yeah, he was the dominant male.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
He actually died in the building.
How? Do they know how he died?
I don't remember. Oh, I think he had a heart attack.
Oh.
But also in that same room, they had a suicide by hanging.
Oh, delightful.
Yeah. So,
So they're all kind of clustered in there, huh?
yeah. Well, Danny picked up that
Oh.
at one time it was a wayward house for girls,
Oh.
and men would come in there and, do their thing, and they end up getting pregnant, having their babies there. Some died in childbirth. Some
Mm.
babies died there. We picked up a few. I bought trigger objects, so we had our EMFs going off near the trigger objects. Like, I have one that I have to put a quarter in to keep it on. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
older model EMFs,
Mm-hmm.
and we kept telling. Daddy said there was a little girl trying to, mess with the toys. So we asked her, if you take that coin out of there, you can have it. And
Mm-hmm.
she kept trying because the lights kept going off.
That
Yeah.
was terrible. That was terrible of you.
Yeah.
You know,
We gave her the
she couldn't
toys
take it.
too. Like, if you can take the toys, you can have them too.
I'd have left it. Did you leave it? She might
No.
follow you home to find the coin, huh? Well, that is. I'd like to go there. I remember doing an actually a call in with you for that station. I think some night several years ago. So, but it it never usually turns out like the general public or like the I want to say the TV people expect. They kind of and invariably like the cameramen and all that. They're like, this isn't true. This isn't. There's the equipment. They're working the equipment that's going to get drained or that's going to be
Right.
affected. So
I think
you're
she had some backup batteries.
yeah. But so they left around 2 a.m. But you guys stayed the rest of the night.
Yes, we stayed.
Cool. And I guess she didn't want to, or they would have stayed.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
they left. But
so-
we hopefully we get some good. I'm pretty sure we do have some good stuff.
mhm. Well, yeah, and we're gonna have to share it on a future show.
Yeah.
So see what you got.
Well,
But
the
I
girl
mean,
from the news went back and she did the Halloween special like I had did in 2012. I had went back and played. Well, we were having technical difficulties back then trying to get
mhm,
our EVPs to play. So
mhm.
what I did is I bought that back on a USB and she played them for everybody.
Oh, cool.
The ones so they got to hear them. So I'm guessing the next special, and they have a website so for the news and cable on. So whatever I get, they can put on their website for their listeners. And
That's excellent. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, how did she feel about having to stay there or having to be at night be the nighttime host?
I mean, the people that work there,
Mm-hmm.
they hear things, see things, feel things, but it doesn't scare them because it's nothing malevolent,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
they've been there,
I don't know. Some old guy calling you a bitch is, you know.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
she's never been hurt, nobody's
yeah.
ever had problems like that. So pretty
Well,
much
that's.
good spirits there.
Did you do anything for Halloween itself? What did you do?
What did I do?
It was a
I don't
Tuesday night.
remember. Oh, Tuesday night. I didn't do
Couldn't have been
anything.
that big of a deal.
Oh, I know what happened. Well, the Saturday night we had a friend that we have, it's called Don's Boat Landing over here, and they were having a Halloween party. So I get Shane all dressed up in his
Shane's her
clown.
husband.
Yeah, my husband. He had a clown outfit. So I get him with his makeup and all this on. So I'm fixing to get dressed, okay? I'm gonna go meet him. The lights go out. Like
Happy Halloween.
everything went dead. So
You
I'm
mean
sitting here like now I
just in
can't
your
go
house or like?
in well, the whole block.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the whole street went down. I'm like, well, look at this. Had my stuff all ready, but I can't see. And my dog's all on top of me because we have the
They're
lights out.
scared.
Well, a good thing, it was cool outside because I had to open the doors.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the whole street's out.
Sometimes I think they do that deliberately, like on Halloween and stuff like that. Pull
Yeah.
out different little sections just to spook people out. Or I would. I
So
remember that
I couldn't
happening.
dress up, and that's like my favorite time of the year.
I know.
Shane's like, well, I'll come and hold the flashlight. You can get ready. I'm like, really? I don't think it's going to work like that.
You need to get one of those camp lights, those ones that you camp with, like a Coleman light that, works on a battery or whatever.
That I could see me putting white contacts in with a flashlight.
I could. I could see that. I can do it in a completely dark room. I've been putting them in for so long, the regular ones, so I can see, not the colored ones. But well, that's good. I'm glad that you'll have some evidence for upcoming shows, and so been looking on Facebook and social media, and everybody went to the different events here and afar. Were just just chopping about it and chatting about it. And it was like, oh, like it's so wonderful at this vampire ball and that one, and so some
Did
people
y'all
out
give
there
out
must have had
candy?
We did. Yes, we did.
I've seen Amanda's costume. It was awesome.
Amanda, yes, Amanda, my daughter, surprised me by dressing up as a witch. She actually, when we went to Harry Potter World, or went to a Universal Orlando, we all got, well, I say all, it was my daughter, my nephew, and me, and we all got wands. And so my nephew got Sirius Black. If you know the franchise, everybody knows who he is. And I had to get the Bellatrix Lestrange, which is sort of the bent wood. And then she got Narcissa Malfoy. And it's a really nice looking wand. It's whatever, whatever it is, it's resin, but it's really, really nice looking. So she brought that out. I gave her one of the witch's hats that I had. And we walked around town. We went out to Barnes and Noble. We went out to lunch. And she's like, you should dress up too. And I'm like, no, because the only thing I want to put on is in a container, one of those tub containers upstairs in the attic. So I was like, it's not worth it. I'll just be the escort, So yeah, she dressed up, and there were some other people walking around and all. We just sat on the porch, and she's still in costume, and we gave out candy, and that lunatic dog of ours just barked and barked and howled and didn't want to be in a cage and didn't want to be in a yard. And then she was outside, and everybody was afraid of her in the front, so I was like, I put her on Facebook that, she's the hound of the Baskervilles, because if you leave her alone long enough, just barking, she'll suddenly howl because she thinks you can't hear her,
Yeah.
So we had sound effects and everything. I was like, and then, I went in, and really, I'll go to the events and stuff, but I'm not no longer, big deal with Halloween. But they had that movie, The Haunting, on. You remember the one we saw at the Paracon in Vicksburg? When they had the movie theater. It's 1960. It's one of the ones that creeped me out when I was a kid. It's probably my favorite, like, gothic horror one. It's the reason why I hate little cherubs, those little angelic cherub faces that you see there on brass. I hate them because there's a scene in it, if you might remember, where the thing is pounding on the door with the two women inside trying to get in the room, and then it goes quiet, and then they zoom in on this doorknob with this cherub face, this little angel's cherub face, and it starts to turn very slowly. Well, I saw it the first time I saw it, I was probably 5 years old, and I've hated it. I hate that. I'm not surrounded by any little smiling angels, none of this Renaissance crap of these little baby cherubs. I've never, I don't trust them and I don't want them around, so.
Yeah.
Mm. But
Okay.
we did go, on All Saints Day. We
Mm-hmm.
went, we went to the cemeteries, and brought flowers, which was Wednesday, for All Saints. And so, we went to all the cemeteries. That's a big thing. Nobody was out there painting or anything. We kind of went at near the end, like in the late afternoon. But we had all our flowers, put them out on all the dead, and so we did that. It was something we wanted to do, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody was doing it out there too. So, but pretty much we
Yeah.
observed that usual thing. So, okay, I think you just messaged me.
Yes.
And I think that means that, our guest is on board. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you guys doing?
Hey.
We're fine, and I'm very excited, and I'll probably flub up because I'm
Oh
very
no,
happy to
it's
have you.
okay.
I'm Aline Pastanio. I know you've been talking with Bernadine to set it up, but we're happy to have you. Thanks for taking the time out to be on our show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, we were talking about how our Halloweens were, which are probably boring to you, but how are yours? How was yours?
Mine was pretty good. I didn't get a whole lot of time to spend with the trick-or-treaters in the neighborhood, although we had many, many of them around here because I was at the local library doing a volunteer appearance. It was a
Awesome.
twofer. So one of the librarians was doing some really, really nifty presentation stuff on how to research your house. Like all the way back to like when it was built and who owned it, and like go back through all of the families. And then my half of it was, so what do you do if it's haunted?
That was great. That's a good one. Yeah, like they have that website, who Death in Home, or how do you look up, if someone died in the house, and then
Yeah.
go from there. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's perfect. And did you scare the little kids by dressing up, or did you just go as
I
yourself?
didn't get a chance. Yeah, I just went as me. Tomorrow is my big day for being creepily dressed up. I've got an artist friend, Joseph Vargo, and he's behind Monolith Graphics and Nox Arcana. I've done my CD Blood of Angels was with him and with William Piotrowski. Every year, for 2 weekends on either side of Halloween, he turns his mansion into a puzzle box. Is the best way I can describe it. So you go in costume, and your costume is your character, and there's a whole theme. This year we are exploring the ancestral home of our host, and he has just inherited it, and there is a great history of dark magic and murder, and by the end of the night we solve a whole bunch of puzzles that he's designed very cleverly, some of which like have moving parts that will open and close doors in the house.
Oh, wow.
It's super, super cool. He's
Sounds
one of the
like
only
that
people
show
I know who
13
has.
Ghosts.
Yeah, 13
Yeah,
goes.
it's fun. He put
And no
so much
spells.
work into it,
I can't
and that's
imagine that.
yeah, highlight of my year.
For two
Sounds
weekends,
awesome.
you're going tomorrow. So tomorrow to that, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
tomorrow.
well, we've been, we're talking about Halloween. I know who you are, and we kind of, Dean and I both do. But I just wanted to give a little bit of a blurb. I don't have my PC in front of me because my dog ate the cord on it, so I had to order.
Don't worry about it.
I had to order a new cord. So, but we have Michelle. You're just so well known. You're probably well known for two things. Your vampire history, your authority on vampires, of all sorts, from the past and in present time, and then Paranormal State, where you appeared many times on what, like 2 or 3 seasons, I think, or maybe more, because I know you're a very frequent guest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
From let's say I was doing research behind the scenes in first season, and I think the first episode I was only on as a call-in for Black and White, I think was the name of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of their backup because they had an expert on voodoo who turned out to, be one of those experts who read a book and
Mm-hmm.
wasn't necessarily an expert. And they got wise to it, and they were like, "So, how are you on voodoo?" And I'm like, "Well, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I could answer a couple of questions and maybe direct you towards some sources. And they're like, that will be good enough. We're in a crunch.
Good. And then they made you a regular, well, sort of a
Yep.
go-to for a medium for some of their
Yeah.
cases. So, and I did enjoy Paranormal State. Because there's such a glut, just a whole bunch of different shows. But I did consistently watch it. It was one of the ones that I liked, as opposed to maybe Ghost Hunters or and then Ghost Adventures. It's all so similar, and it's hard for a show to distinguish itself. And I always feel like it's the people that they work with that distinguishes. And so seeing a show that would have Lorraine Warren come on, or Chip Coffey, or you. It's a little bit, it kind of like lifts it up a little bit from the common fare for me. So I was watching while you were on there, but I had seen you a bunch of other times, and then on several different stories about the supernatural, vampires. I've seen you as just a guest on. I can't even begin to name the amount of shows that you've been on. So
yeah, I've lost track too.
Yeah, and so that's how I knew you. And then I said, "Oh, now that's my dog barking in the back." So I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. We may end up with a kitty.
A kitty, that's fine.
Yeah, she'll wander over and like mule at the especially when I'm doing interviews. Like, she's quiet most of the other time, but if I'm talking to something and there isn't a person that she can see in the room, she wants to join in.
And she thinks you're talking to her, probably.
Probably.
But what I was getting to was like, you've been around a long time. And so a lot of people did first like discover you and meet you on Paranormal State. So I was looking at some of your YouTube videos, et cetera, explaining how you, basically came to the realization that you were, by what you were feeling and experiencing, a vampire. In your case, like a psychic vampire, and then how you came out about it. So maybe for those people who are like, new to you or just listening in to see what it's all about, can you just kind of like recap that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially most of the people at this point know my face from Paranormal State, and that never really came up. But if it's a vampire documentary that's been done in the past 20, 25 years, if I wasn't on it, I was involved in it. And that's got everything to do with my particular flavor of psychic ability. I mean, everybody's psychic is a little different. I would not be psychic if it were not also for the vampiric qualities that I have. And I know when you say the word vampire, it sounds very ooky spooky, or it conjures images of, angsty teens in dark corners of nightclubs wearing way too much eyeliner, which, for the record, I did.
We've
been there.
Yeah. Hey, those were fun years. So the reason I hit on the word psychic vampire, as I was a sickly child, had open heart surgery twice before the age of 5, among other things, and as early as first grade, I was aware that I was able not only to sense the energy of my fellow students, but I could, if I wanted to and if I needed to, take that, usually through touch, in order to make myself feel better. And when I was that young, I didn't really like poke at it too much, try to understand what was really going on. But even then, I had hit on the word vampire as what that was. And as I headed into my teen years is when I started to like really research, like, what is energy? Does this exist? Can I be taking something real? Is this something that's actually happening, or is it all in my head? Being raised in a family where psychic abilities were something that we talked about, sometimes only behind closed doors, but still there was an atmosphere of permission to inquire about them and to be psychic without shame. The idea that we had powers that were more than just our 5 physical senses, based more than just in our body, powers that our minds could do, that we could impact the world around us through a thought. That gave me a basis to willingly explore this without feeling too crazy. But even then, it was still it was the late 80s, the early 90s, and these days we live in an age where Reiki and Tai Chi and Qigong and a whole lot of different energetic techniques have become fairly common. But then the very idea, the word chi or ki, they weren't as widely understood. So where I hit on the word psychic vampire specifically was in a text by Dion Fortune. She was writing in the 30s, and the book is called Psychic Self-Defense. I highly recommend reading it. It's a little bit dated in its language, but a lot of the core concepts, not merely about psychic vampirism, but about how to protect yourself in hauntings, and a whole bunch of concepts about how spirits interact with energy and with people are in that book. Fortune was not just, she was a stuff, and she really knew her stuff. Mm-hmm. She had an experience with a coworker. Actually, it was a boss that she worked for who was taking her energy and was doing so in an aggressive fashion and in a way that really, really wrecked Ms. Fortune's health for a little while. And she's the one, she isn't the one who coined the term psychic vampire exclusively, but she was certainly the one who popularized it and put it in a context that really made sense. Right. Everything that she was describing about this person was what I was doing, except I typically sought consent. I didn't like taking from people without their permission. And so I started to look for more records about people like this, and to see if were all of them predators was my biggest concern, because everything I ran across at the time was only reports of people who'd been victimized, which led me to honestly start writing my own stuff on it. Recording my own experiences, running experiments with friends on energy work, and what it was like to give and to take, and led to a fairly deep theology of the give and take and natural flow of the universe. That taking isn't necessarily always a terrible thing, and that some people have a little too much energy and some people have not quite enough. And as long as it is a workable partnership, as long as it's an exchange, and it is willing, and then it's something that is honestly functional, if not beneficial, for both parties. So that was 1991, and at that time, I learned that there were other people like me that were making the same exploration, the same halting journey of, this is what I am. And I equate it to, back in the 50s and 60s when Wicca and the witchcraft movement started to be a thing. And the good witches, not like, black magic or anything like that, but the folks who follow witchcraft as their spiritual path and practice it as a way of honoring the earth and connecting in a different way to deity. And, they took the word witch, which was pretty much, the green warty-nosed person from The Wizard of Oz and from, all of the witchcraft myths of the Middle Ages, and they reclaimed the word, repurposed it to how they identified. And we were doing the same thing with vampire. We did not at any point think that we were Dracula risen from the grave. It wasn't quite like that, although certainly it went hand in hand with a lot of us who were in the Gothic subculture. And I think partly because that archetype, the vampire, was a romanticized ideal among Goths, that immortality and that deep mystical power. So again, it was we had permission to investigate it, to own it, to claim it as an identity.
Right. And then that was helped along, obviously, by popular fiction. Anne Rice. Needless to say, I'm going to get to Twilight later. I do want to ask you about that, but I want to ask you later. And I'm probably going to agree with what you say. But I also I was watching your video on YouTube, and part of what directed you to this path was an early interest in what people would say is like, quote unquote, dark or Gothic literature, like Poe and, Oscar Wilde stories like Dorian Gray, and the vampire stories that are like, the Castle of Otranto and all this other stuff. So you knew at a very early age that something was going on, and that was that was the way to look to find out what it was, basically, that you went down that path.
I always had an affinity for the darker hours, night, and anything that was hidden in the shadows. Like I was never afraid of the dark. I always wanted to explore it. And that kind of goes for every aspect of my life. And I've had some people theorize that has to do with like the early brushes with death on my own part, that it left me with some kind of morbidity, but I don't find it to be a morbidity. I don't find that I like dwell in darkness because I'm like moping in a corner. There's just something that speaks to me. And there's a power there that too many people shy away from. And it's not an evil power. I think we look at things that are hidden, and some people shy away because they're afraid they can't predict it. You know, there's the fear that it is dangerous. And my nature is more that I want to understand it because my knowledge of it then negates its danger. It puts me in control of it instead. And yeah, I was a very early reader. I was digging through Poe and Stoker and all of that. And I love that you named some of the old Gothic stuff. The monk and
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. I was that kid too. I didn't become a vampire. I had to walk my own path through some really terrible experiences when I was young. Basically my mother, with that early part of the paranormal that involved Lorraine and Ed and then Hans Holzer and all, she was into all of that, but she didn't know what she was doing. And basically she brought it home, you know what I mean? It came home and it was demonic and we had to deal with it. And it was I was a little conflicted too, because I was seeing dark things, or what people would characterize as dark things. And I was scared by a lot of it. I mean, I've written about it, but then I had to understand it because my mom's dead. She passed. And a big part of the reason is the way that it affected her. Now I understand it as an oppression or an obsession and all. So, and I often, Bernadine and I both say, how do you know who you're up against if you're in a situation of conflict or, even a haunting, unless you understand it and know what to expect from it. And the way to do that is like you're saying, read, understand, look at how other people in other eras looked at it. Do you agree?
Yeah, you can't be afraid to study something. I mean, educating yourself about something is not the same as inviting it to your life. It's the exact opposite. Educating yourself about something, reading as much as you can, learning as much as you can, gives you the tools. It's your sword and your shield. It's always funny to me when people are hesitant to pick up my book, The Dictionary of Demons, because they're afraid that all of those names gathered in one place somehow will cause harm to them or bring darkness to their house. And I'm like, those are words on a page.
Exactly.
And those words will teach you, like the old, if you go all the way back to like the cradle of Western civilization, where some of our earliest techniques for exorcism and writings about possession and oppression appear, the name of a demon in those traditions is not only used to call it, it's used to bind it, to compel it, and to drive it out. And so the more information you have, the more control you have. And it's your fear that is really the thing that you want to leave behind. It's your fear that usually leaves you open to be victimized.
Well, yeah, and you're absolutely right. Because the Roman ritual, the Catholic Church ritual, they need its name. They want its name because once they have its name, then they have a connection to it, and then they can, go forward with whatever they're going to do. The exorcism, it has to listen to them because it's his given name. And then people, I'm going to ask Dean to jump in with a question, but I'm going to tell you this, Michelle. I was on. I don't know. I don't subscribe to it anymore after a couple of days of people saying Halloween's coming and they're going to sacrifice children. Halloween is coming and it's terrible. I couldn't believe that there were people out there that actually said that, that are still thinking in that mindset with all of the information available to them. It's like, and I was telling them, they're probably not going to sacrifice on Samhain. They're going to go maybe the one you need to worry about maybe is Beltane or, the Autumn Festival. But it's talking to a brick wall. And they're the people that will not say the name of the demon. I had one guy, I asked him what the name of the demon. He said he was so oppressed by, he couldn't get the name out of his head. He had to drive off the road and call a friend so they could talk it out. And I'm like, well, what demon are you talking about? He said, it starts with an A. And so I started naming them. And yeah, I never got to it. Right. And he's like, don't say, I'm like, I said, look, unless I'm standing in a circle, and I've got a triangle of manifestation right there, or I'm doing some kind of ritual, it doesn't matter how many, they don't just show up. They have believe it or not, they are doing other things. Right. So as are all spirits. Right. But it's like that fear. And it really casts, people like you who, are in the twilight, sort of in that gray area, that go from the light and the dark and then bring understanding. It really casts you in just a really negative way that you don't deserve, because you're a source of knowledge that shouldn't be ignored. But Dean, you got a question. I'm gonna let you jump in.
Yeah, I think people are afraid of what they don't understand. And from what they're taught from a young age, if they're afraid of something, they're just not going to deal with it, period. So I believe, researching something is not the exact same thing as practicing it.
Yeah, I agree.
So the more knowledge you have, the better, and if it comes your way, at least you may know something versus nothing.
Yeah.
Because, I see people in Walmart, they're like, you do voodoo. Well, and I'm like, I'm just a paranormal investigator. I help people,
She lives in a really small town, Michelle.
Yeah, I'm in Louisiana, so everybody's voodoo here. So if you're on the dark side, you're actually on the dark side in their eyes. So yeah, they don't understand, and no matter what you say, they're not going to understand. And what I was going to ask you is, in your teens, I know you were coming into your abilities and things like that. Did you feel like some friends were kind of offset from you? Maybe they backed away from you because they were afraid of your abilities?
Certainly there were some. I was a little afraid of them myself, and it's why it was so important for me to understand, what psychic vampirism was, and like how that related to me, because here I am realizing that I have the ability to reach out, and I can do it without touching somebody, but touch definitely makes it more intense. But imagine being 12 or 13 and realizing that you can touch a classmate and make them like woozy or dizzy or even pass out. And trying, answering the questions to yourself of like, what do I do with this ability? Is this an ability that makes me evil? Is it something that, and realizing that it was my choice to do it or to not do it. Like learning about it, recognizing that it was really something that I could do and to a certain extent needed to do, and then learning to make choices. But yeah, there were certainly people around me who were terrified, and not just about that. I was pretty quiet about the vampirism in a lot of my like immediate social circles at those earlier ages, but we definitely played around with talking with spirits, and I've got how you have your tight little knot of friends. There were three of us, and we were inseparable from like the end of middle school to early high school, and one of the girls' brothers was just terrified of me. I'm pretty sure he is a super, super extreme born again Christian because of some of the stuff that he was around, and he felt so out of control about it that he just went running as far away from it as he possibly could, because it just made him practically wet himself.
That's exactly what my mother did.
Do you think that maybe he felt that you could see through his soul and he had a lot to hide?
I think that there was certainly a little bit of that. I know as I've gotten older, if people are a little funny about me, and it's a justified funny, like they've met me, and then they get kind of weird, because there's plenty of people who are funny about me on the internet, but that's the internet. But if they've met me and they're still acting a little strange about it, I found I'll usually hear through the grapevine that their biggest concern is they're afraid that I'm going to read their mind without their permission, or that I'm going to know things about them that they're hiding, which of course makes me want to know what they're hiding that has them so nervous.
That's a good one.
I guess you kind of learn to. to know who you can talk to about things like that and who you can't in this life.
I do. I try not to slip up every once in a while, especially with certain psychic impressions. Every once in a while, there's something that I'll blurt out, and I won't even realize that it was a psychic impression until it's out of my mouth and the person is staring at me. And the one that sticks in my memory, I used to work second shift at a gas station. I've worked a lot of jobs that people would find like, you did what? Like, but I loved it. I loved, like, my regulars and everything. And hey, it paid the bills at the time. There was a trucker who came in. He was not a regular. He was just passing through, and I cash him out, and I'm making small talk, and I look up and I go, "How's that pacemaker working out?" Just for no reason, like, it's just out of my mouth, small talk, and he stares at me and he checks his wrists. I guess he's looking for, like, whether or not he's got his wristband from the hospital still on there. He like looks at his chest and he like stares at me, and I was like, and I realized as he's like gawking at me in shock that I saw it. Like I saw it in his chest, and I'm looking again at his shirt. His shirt's buttoned all the way up. You can't even see a scar. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. He's like, how'd you know that? I'm like, lucky guess. Really lucky.
You told me the last time you were in here. Yeah. Some people are.
Yeah, I didn't have plausible deniability there. I've accepted that, like, if something blurts out past all of my barriers, then it's something that I needed to say. But I really make an effort to not, first of all, to not read people if I can help it. Like, I have people when I'm at events ask me to read them, read their aura, whatever, all the time. And one of the things that I consider my responsibility at an event is to keep all my psychic stuff to myself. I shield fairly stringently, not just so that I'm not reading people, but also so that my energy is not spilling out all over the place, because it's loud. So other people who are sensitive, even if I'm not doing anything actively to them, they'll pick up on it, and sometimes it makes them uncomfortable. So I try really hard to keep it as much under control as possible. And even so, I'll still slip up now and then.
Yeah, and then they'll walk away with a free reading or something by accident, which I think is. They shouldn't walk up and say, "Hey, what do you see?" or something like that. It's just my.
People ask for it all the time.
Yeah, it's like a busman's holiday. It's like, I do this, I'm here. I don't. Then you want to tell them something like, and I'm not psychic. I've done tarot cards, and I get like in an intuitive groove, but I'm not at all psychic. And the older I get, the dumber I can't anticipate anything, evidently. So I don't have that experience. But once, like, somebody sees you doing tarot cards and they think, oh, you know it all, what do you see? What do you see? And all you're doing is looking at symbols and all. But I wanted to kind of steer into the actual experience of psychic vampirism. When I saw you prior to you joining, A&E and becoming, like, more familiar, I've seen you on several other shows, and I think it was like a 2-hour thing about the origins of vampires and et cetera. And you were demonstrating basically what it is that you engage in. And so, and it was, it was fascinating. It was just sort of like an aura massage is what I was seeing. So can you kind of like explain what it is and how the energy is shared, as opposed to just stolen from somebody like, some others might do?
Well, if people are familiar with Reiki or any kind of energy work that involves laying on of hands, the mechanics are almost identical. I connect to the person. Usually I'll place my hands on their back, on their shoulders, to just kind of build a rapport, because it's easier if we're sort of resonating on the same frequency. And I know that might sound cheesy, but I don't have better words for that, where it just, you sort of fall into a rhythm together. And that helps to relax them. It helps to focus me. And then the energy rides upon the breath. Like, the touch helps to focus it, and helps me to focus the connection. But it's really almost like breathing in warm, thick water. There's this power that rises off of a person. When I'm doing that, I am also, consciously or not, kind of reading their energy from aura inward, like through these deeper and deeper layers, I become aware of blockages. I become aware of damage. I become aware of places where they're holding stuff like too tight, stuff that they need to release. And so it becomes, when it's done intentionally like that, it becomes really like an aura cleansing, like a full energy body cleansing, really. And I'm releasing the stuff that they need to let go of anyway. And because they've given permission, it's a much easier release. I mean, you don't want to. The permission is so important because, like, if you walked up to somebody on the street and you just look, there's this intrusion in your energy, and you just sort of like reached in and willy-nilly yanked it out, it's going to hurt. It's going to feel like a violation, because it is. In the same way that, like, walking up to someone that you have never really met, or any, like, and just like grabbing them, touching them, anything, any uninvited contact. And this is very intimate contact, even if it's just my hands on their back, because energy carries so much of our essence, so much of, there's so much information that comes along with this, layers of emotion, fleeting thoughts, memories. And so it doesn't look like much on the camera. It's just, we've tried to, I've been involved in a number of different shows where they've attempted to, in some way, shape, or form, get a way to record what's happening. And the best one was, I think, Monster Quest, where they used a FLIR camera. And the FLIR camera got to see changes in temperature, which is super, super fun, where like my hands are usually really quite cold, and they start out really cold. And as I'm doing this, everything gets super hot, to the point where it ends up looking almost like I've got spotlights in the middle of my palms. And we did that one. We can do that where I'm like just a couple of inches away from the person, and you can just see it rise off of them and come to me.
I've seen that one.
Pretty neat.
I saw you. Yeah. That's basically why not use a thermal camera, all the time if they want to really illustrate what you're doing. So, but that was the first time I saw you do that. And it was a better illustration, to get you. I mean, I thought about it. I was like, why don't they use a thermal? And then they did, so, but what do you, when you release,
it was a matter about getting it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah. Sometimes it was just a matter about getting the technology. Like, not everybody had access to it. So
yeah, it was a while ago. No, I was just going to say, when you draw this energy and release this energy within the donor, what do you do with it? Do you absorb it or dissipate it, or absorb what's good in it and dissipate the rest? How do you handle that?
So I process it. I filter out the stuff that I can't use, the stuff that's like too chunky or too negative or whatever, and shunt that off. And in a lot of ways, cleanse it. And yeah, it comes into me to sustain me. Everybody takes energy from the people around them and from the environment around them. In most cases, it's a give and take, so that you don't really notice that there's more take than give. In the average person, there isn't. And most people are taking from many, many different sources. And most of the people who I have found identify as psychic vampires have a limited range of energies that they can connect to. Most of it comes from people for one reason or another. There's a whole lot of theories, and of course they're all just theories, because none of us, I mean, this is a field that we experience, but can't really know 100% for sure. The way I liken it is, while I can sense and connect to an awful lot of different types of energies, I cannot take them to sustain myself. Like, my body doesn't want to process them in the same way that everybody else seems to be able to process them. There's some step that's missing. Because Lord knows I tried. I studied some fun Taoist techniques, trying to basically like go, okay, well, it's not convenient to find people who are willing and knowledgeable in energy work in order to make this exchange on a regular basis. And because I'm so strict in the ethics, there were definitely lean years, and I go through a lot of slowly degrading physical symptoms that are a lot of autoimmune stuff. My immune system takes a dump pretty quickly. A lot of aches and pains. I slow down. On the worst ends, it just becomes, I'm sick all the time. I ended up in the hospital a couple of times with it, and I would say that there was something wrong, except when I checked myself out and just did an energetic exchange afterwards, everything was fine. So it was over time that I became a believer that this was really a thing that was going on. But long story short is, for some reason, most of the energy that I can actually make use of comes from people. It's pre-chewed. It's already, tuned to the human to the human element. The person I'm taking from mostly gets very relaxed, warm, cozy, like curl up in a blanket feeling. They'll usually sleep. In high school, I was usually nicknamed. I was often referred to as the universal cure for insomnia. If you wanted to relax, get a back rub
Invite you
for me.
over.
Yeah. Yeah, have me give a back rub, and that was usually what I would do. Is I felt it was important to give something back, and to do something useful with it, not just take for the sake of taking.
Right. And a lot of people are even afraid of that. I just, I was while you were talking, I was thinking of something I saw in one of your videos earlier, describing the attack, the psychic vampire attack, as sort of like a rape experience, where it's just, and I was, I'm not going to elaborate too much, but I know a psychic vampire, and that's what he does. That's what he does. And the way that he does it is sort of like in voodoo, and I mean, I'm down in New Orleans, but it's, he works to get you angry, because it's the anger that he's, and he keeps goading you, and he'll tell you things to break down your self-esteem or to break down your positivity or whatever. And then he's just feeding and feeding and feeding on that. And one time he kind of overstepped it. He took it and then he made something manifest in his life, which was exactly what I was saying, what I had been thinking that I wanted. I wanted this. Of course, we don't always know, but he got, like, it was just flip-flop. It was like total. And I was like, oh, now I see you. Because a lot of people don't realize, because you were also describing sick people, relatives who are negative, people who are always bitching and complaining and, all this other stuff. That's energy to be fed off of too. And that's also psychic vampire activity, right?
Yeah. Well, there's two main ways, especially unconscious psychic vampires will do it. And people can be born the way that I am. and sometimes just chronic illness, chronic depression will make a person so low energy that they start to unconsciously vampirize people around them to make up for it. And those are the people who kind of become those drains on their friend group. Pardon me, I'm going to cough, and I'm going to try not to do it real loud. So there's the type like the guy you're describing, who tend to be domineering, and they find strong emotion, and in that case, like anger and frustration, and they find every button to push to get that. I mean, simultaneously, the strong emotional reaction the victim is having breaks down their walls, gets them to not, throws them off center, makes it way easier to connect to them, and is producing a lot of energy. High emotion, strong emotion produces a lot of really tasty energy. The other ones are, your old Aunt Edna, who doesn't really ever leave the house, and all the relatives really loathe going over there because you're going to sit on the couch with her talking for like the next 3 hours about her bunions, boils, and hemorrhoids.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if she doesn't have something going wrong, she's going to make up something going wrong. And she's just going to keep you there sitting and sucking the life out of you. And, by the time she's done, you're there wilted on the couch, and you can tell she's feeling better. And she probably has no clue that this is what she's doing. Like she just knows
quite a few of those.
Well, and we all do. And there's a whole lot of factors that lead them to be that way.
But
and
do they get
there's
energy
no conscious
from doing that?
They're
because they're
taking
draining
energy.
yours.
Yeah.
Like when you
they're just
leave
not
that
aware
place from these people, and you don't even have to speak. Just listen to them complain and whine and rah, 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 rah. And by the time you leave, you're drained.
Yep.
Yeah, and
that's what they say. Oh, I feel
you.
So much better that you came over. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. Yeah, and I've had relatives like that too.
And it's not just venting, because they have people that vent. It's not that. The people the vampires, these people, you loathe going into their house because you know how you're going to come out.
You can feel it. You can totally feel it when it's happening. And even if you don't necessarily think of the word vampire, most of us will feel it and go, that person is, they're draining. Like, we've got a lot of language that's describing exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are why it was so important for me as a teen to pin a word to it. And by naming it and by labeling it, it put it in a place where I could make conscious choices about it. Because the biggest problem with Aunt Edna is she has no clue what she's doing. She's going to do it just instinctively. She's always going to do it. There's no way to turn it off. And it's really hard. It's
She'll
very
live
unlikely
longer and
to
she'll
ever
kill you.
Right. She'll outlive everybody.
And there's no having that conversation with Aunt Edna and saying, "Dear Aunt Edna, you're sucking us dry. Please stop." She'll laugh it off or just get upset. But like the victimizer, like the guy that you're talking about, the dominant ones, and there are some who are unconscious about it as well, but there are some that totally know what they're doing. They might also not call it vampirism. They might not think of it as mystical or think of it as energy, but they know they are getting something
I told
these
him
situations.
that. I told him one time.
Yeah.
I said, you're a psychic vampire. I wish that I was. He said. I was like, yeah, well, bullshit. It's like, but it's a violation, and that's how I felt. It's a violation. It's like I'm like related to you too, and I'm working together with you, but you're siphoning off. Well, then I began to look at myself and say, well, how much can I accomplish on my own? And this is my energy. Why don't I keep it? But it really is a violation. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be someone related to you. Well, I know that you've talked about shielding yourself from it. And so how do you basically set up a shield so where you can go and visit Aunt Edna and, stay for coffee and everything else, or be around basically, like if you go in a bar, I remember hearing you speak about this. If you go into a situation, maybe at the culture of vampirism, where you might know what you're walking into, and who might be a sanguine, who might be this or whatever, but the innocent or the person who's just hanging around, who like we went to Endless Nights a couple of years ago, and the festival is they got a bunch of people there because of the fashion and everything, but there are also a bunch of blood drinkers in there too, and psychic vampires.
There totally are, and psychic vampires. Some of whom consider that like perfect place to just graze, and if you've walked through the door on some level, you've given consent, which I think is a little wibbly, but not
you
kind of know what
you kind of know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And whenever I've said, I've referred anybody to that event, I'm like, just be careful. Anne Rice's event, like they have a vampire ball, that's a little bit more dress up and fun related, but this one is a mix that you can't control, because there really are vampires out there of all sorts, not just and they're all not, all of them don't have your best intention, in their mind, they don't care about you. There are some people who don't. So I always have that warning, because then it becomes an experience. Like, I guess it was with me, it was because we were so close. And luckily it was like, and I'm like, okay, you're going to do this. All right, that's it. And so you just have to isolate yourself. And I guess they have to find somebody else to feed off of. But it kept me down for years, telling me, you can't do this and this. I mean, seriously, Michelle, it's just, and I used to think about you too. I took well, who do I know this? It's like, I was going to say, do you think this is a psychic? And when I figured it out, finally, I'm like, this is, it's a terrible thing to do.
It can be incredibly devastating, and it leaves you so fragile on so many levels afterwards.
And the trust issue.
Yeah.
Especially if we're someone like us who, Bernadine investigates paranormal. I've been studying occultism and everything since, I was young. We always had ghosts around and stuff like that. We're always kind of like a haunted family, but, I've been into it, but then I really wanted to understand what my mother and, the bad things that I saw happen. So, I mean, I know what's out there. Like, I firmly think, and I'm going to kind of segue just a little bit into the folklore. I know that if someone like that is strong enough at the time of death to maintain their body, basically their shell or their etheric revenant through the first death and not pass through the second death, they will be able to do that, especially as long as there's a physical remnant of their body, and that kind of keeps the folklore. What is your opinion on that? Like, if you can maintain consciousness up to the point of death, and then basically your spirit passes out, but you're still aware. Isn't that the vampire folklore? Because That's what I've come to understand from my research. That's the thing that, is trying to keep itself desperately alive, and it becomes the predator that we basically know in folklore. Do you agree with that?
I agree that in a lot of the folkloric instances, that seems to be what's going on. And one of the things that I've noticed in many hauntings is ghosts take energy. Actually, all spirits take energy, and it only makes sense for them to have to do so. They have to sustain themselves somehow. Some, like psychic vampires, seem to really favor human energy more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And some seem to willingly, really, they like to take it just to take it. And yes, so in the folklore, there are both living vampires and dead or undead vampires. And the further I dug into the folklore, especially the Eastern European folklore, which gave us the word vampire in the first place, mm-hmm. The more I saw that when they were talking about living vampires, they sounded like people like me, while they also had people lumped in with that who were just psychics, who practiced witchcraft, pretty much anybody who had a sort of unusual power, but especially if it was connected with energy and life, mm-hmm. some ability to take life, and not merely life from people. There were a couple of stories of living vampires that could suck the fertility out of the fields and out of the animals and things. Mm-hmm. And pretty universally, those were believed that once they passed on, they would continue those abilities. They would carry those abilities with them beyond the grave. Mm-hmm. The book I cited, Dion Fortune's Psychic Self-Defense, she makes a distinction between what she calls them astral vampires, the ones that have maintained a core sense of personality, had enough mm-hmm. strength of will to carry themselves through that, and to survive the first death and maintain in the second death, and basically become astral entities that preyed upon people in order to keep themselves going.
And then I guess they become, at least in folklore, they become more desperate, the longer they are out there, basically. It has an end point. If there's no more physical remaining to, basically go back to. One description, and this is what I tell people, whenever I lecture or whenever somebody invites me to talk about the vampires of romance, the aristocrats sleeping in the coffin, I always tell mm-hmm. them, or Edward Cullen or whatever, and I'm like, and I'm thinking specifically of a Romance Writers of America conference that I went to, and I'm invited to speak at another one, and I basically said, I know I'm going to go in here and burst all these bubbles about Edward Cullen and Twilight and all this other stuff. Because I told them, and I know you know this, so you see Lestat getting out of the coffin, he's sexy, blonde hair, whoever you picture. I usually picture Rutger Hauer, from years and years mm-hmm. ago. But, and then Tom Cruise was sexy too. But, it's like, you're picturing this and they're fixing their cuffs. I said, how about if you woke up and you saw this big old bladder, this thing, like a big old bubble of blood floating in the air with two red eyes and these pinpoints. And it gets on you, like it bubbles all over you, and then it sucks, either blood at this point or your energy. I said, that is a vampire, according to all of the folklore of Eastern Europe and the homelands of the vampire, even back, and this, to Egypt and Sumeria, etc. That's the vampire. I said, that's not Edward Cullen. That thing goes back to its grave and it burrows in, and when the energy gets low again, it comes out. It's an ectoplasmic manifestation. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, like Verkalakas, which is one of the Greek words for vampire, means round like a drum. A mm-hmm. lot of the folkloric ones are big, fat, red, swollen things. They mm-hmm. dig them up and they'd find them, and they would use what they perceived as proof that they had glutted themselves on blood. Mm-hmm. And some of the reports of what astral entities will appear to people will vary, and I think that's because spirits definitely have the ability to project an image, to assume an image, whether it is projecting that image into your mind or shifting their energetic shape mm-hmm. to fit something. And so you've got this roiling, floating mass of power that may appear as a person and may absolutely not appear as a person, depending on how clear your sight is.
Mm-hmm. And what they're projecting to you. I guess that's why traditionally they would go to first their family,
Yeah,
because not
somebody who's
only,
got a good sense of what they should look like.
right, and they see them as an apparition or whatever, and it's really, the cloaking of this individual, and then it begins to, as you know, predate, on everybody in the community, which is also, I guess, behind the absolute. I've read that any other supernatural being, a werewolf, mermaids, fairies, whatever, the elementals, you can drive them off or protect yourself away from them. But the vampire is the only thing that has to be completely annihilated, because it will come back and back and back, right?
Well, and actually, in one of the Paranormal State episodes, we weren't allowed to call him a vampire on camera, even though he fit absolutely every hallmark of a folkloric vampire. He was even he was Subcarpathian Rus. So like he was from vampire country, and he'd come over to America. He's the coal miner from the Daisytown haunting, and when we went back the second time, without much explanation, they end up showing Ryan as the sun's going down on the summer solstice. By the way, Ryan driving a nail into the grave at the cemetery, and that was as close to staking the thing as we could get. Where you have to just you can't really destroy it. You got to nail it down to its tomb. You've got to bind it. You've got to keep it from getting back out.
Right.
But yeah, the more I did the research on that, the more I'm like, so guys, this is gonna sound cliche, but this guy's a vampire. Like
says the vampire.
This is actually like everything in folklore. Like this is where these stories came from. Here is this person who was kind of a rotten guy in life and a hard drinker and violent, and he didn't stop being that way in death. And he is preying on family members. And like nothing you do to cleanse his house is keeping him away, because he's not a ghost like your average ghost. He is a very different type of critter. So
he's
here's what you got to do. Yeah.
Everybody.
And he knew it. He knew it. He reveled in it. Oh, he totally knew what he was doing. He was a real rotten tomato.
And that's why I have a problem, and so does Bernadine too, when so many teams go out there and they're like, sort of, la-di-da, when they see people on TV calling everything a demon, or saying this dark spirit, quote unquote, is okay, or shadow people are just okay, and you can give them names and stuff, they go out there and they end up, some of them dead eventually. They end up bringing stuff home to their house. They don't know what to do. And so, my own book that I wrote about it was, they need to be aware of the supernatural dangers. And if you, like you were saying, I have to tell you guys, this is really a vampire. We've said that these things exist. And if you don't believe in it, it doesn't matter, because they exist. They believe you and in you, and you don't want to be in their sights. So, why put yourself in danger like that? It's all in the way of, knowing your enemy and stuff. That's basically what we're trying to say. They need to know what, that vampires are real and what's the effect of it, on you. But
yeah, the folklore exists for a reason. There are real things that inspired the folklore.
Right. And there's always a kernel of truth. Something happened to someone, and everybody, I wanted to say about the nail, everyone thinks wood. You see everybody with the wooden stakes, but iron is the thing that will kill it. Even if you have a piece of iron, an iron nail or whatever, when it comes, near you, you can pop it basically, or you break that, that little aura, and it'll disappear, or maybe the blood will go everywhere. I don't know. So, but my last question, I have one more question, and I don't know, Dean, I know you've got some questions, but we're okay. We're at 10:22. I mentioned Twilight, True Blood, Interview with the Vampire, and there's a bunch more that I don't know in the YA. So what's your opinion of that? I mean, I've watched the Twilight movies. I cannot read the book. I'm sorry. I cannot get
I couldn't get through it. Like
I watched the movies because they condense it, and there's some cute people, but they feed on animals. Now I was like, how do I understand what's going on? Well, they're good vampires, and they're, and he can go in the sunlight, but he sparkles. And that's where the bladder, I'm saying, he sparkles all right, but how do you feel about that? Because the archetype that you're talking about is, you've been basically rehabilitating the image of the vampire, and identifying the many types of it. So how do you feel about that stuff being out there, along with all the other stuff on the internet too, all this, this pop culture, hoo-ha, I just don't know any other way to say it. What do you feel about that?
Well, I had to go on Reel's channel and, like, in a politically correct sort of way, talk about Twilight, which meant that I couldn't bash it. So my politically correct answer to Twilight is that, when somebody is fictionalizing something, and it's become very popular to take any kind of supernatural archetype and, like, turn it into part of your paranormal fiction or your urban fantasy. Every writer puts their own spin on it. Everybody adds something to it, changes it a little bit to make it theirs. And the sparkling pretty boys is the direction that she wanted to go in, and that's a thing now. Which, if I had a nickel for every time somebody threatened to throw glitter on me at this point, I could buy some Starbucks.
You can go to Charming Charlie and get that spray, that glitter spray, and put it all over you and smell good too. I just find that it's kind of irresponsible. I don't know why. I guess I kind of take it. It's irresponsible because it's, oh, they're all cute. Oh, they all look like, every color. And, oh, they're friends with well, they're not friends with werewolves. But, the whole thing, I think they take it too lightly. You know what I mean? And it's like they have to have that little bit of danger about it because, like you say, these things are real. There's a kernel of truth. There's a reason that there's warnings about it.
Certainly, once you get to Twilight, they have sucked all of the danger out of the vampire. I mean, like they've just castrated him. Just straight up.
Yeah, just totally. At least Lestat was running around, and he was a predator, and all, you had all that angst going on. But I wanted to let Dean come in here and see. You've got any more questions, Dean?
I have one more question because I know we're coming up at the break in a minute. I have quite a few friends that are mediums, and I know card readers and people around the Louisiana area that have health problems. And one of the things that I researched and I try to get across to them is you can't always walk around with your third eye open, always walk around in psychic mode, because they're having heart problems, and I mean their health is declining. And one of them just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and she was young. So how do you feel about that and health problems? Like, shouldn't they protect themselves or kind of like, shut it down for a while?
Well, the first thing to understand is all of those abilities take fuel. I mean, it's like running a marathon, and if you are not taking good care of yourself and making sure that you are getting the right kind of nourishment to keep it going, then you are going to wreck yourself. And too many people, as a psychic vampire, I totally get, like, I need to take things to keep myself going. But, your average psychic might not realize that they also need to make sure that they are nourishing themselves, not just in body, but also in spirit. Fortunately for them, they don't necessarily have to, like, go find a consenting donor to take energy from. They can go out to any place that energizes them, any place that makes them feel whole, but they need to detach from the things that are exhausting them. They need to detach from, just the empathic connection to the people around them.
Yeah, like
you're
every
right.
person they run around, they're trying to read. I'm like,
yeah,
live your life, calm down.
Well,
yeah,
and
no, that's a bad idea. You're going to exhaust yourself.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and one of her psychics over there actually died, came back with the ability, and he was reading everybody, which I thought was great. I thought it was great, but I could see how it'd be a liability, outside.
And he's had quite a few heart attacks, and he's got health problems.
No off button.
Well, all of it comes to having good boundaries, and shielding is really based off of that, like good emotional, good psychological, good everything boundaries. You take care of yourself. You make sure that you've got a good sense of your limits. You try not to push yourself past those limits. And when you're going into any space, even if it's not, Endless Night's Vampire Ball where you expect to have some predators kicking around, any space, you want to have at least some protection in place. I mean, you don't walk outside without your clothes. You don't walk out when it's cold without a coat. So if you're a psychic, you don't go out into the world without at least a little bit, if not thin film of energy you maintain around yourself to keep some distance between you and everything else that's coming at you, or that you are, tempted on some instinctive level to take onto yourself. I mean, the other thing that I see, the rookie, especially healer mistake I see, is everybody who will take everybody else's illness into them. Like they think healing, they have to take all that pain and hold it in, and somehow like put it in them. And that's a bad plan. Or if they're giving energy to somebody to heal them, that they're only taking their own energy and shoving it into people, as opposed to finding ways to, finding things that power them, channeling energy from the universe, from natural places. Heck, if y'all live in Louisiana, New Orleans itself is just such a power center. And I mean, she's a wild one.
I'm telling you, Michelle,
Yeah.
it's been since right now. It's just that it has such an air of negativity around it. There's so much crime. There's so much upheaval, and it's been really since Katrina.
It's never felt the same to me since Katrina.
Exactly. And, and all of the things that happened in the wake of Katrina, I'm sure you've heard about the cannibal murder, the other things. We have so much just ghosts and spirits feeding, and it really did form a shadow. I mean, it really did wash the whole city in this dark shadow, and it just has not come back. It really has. I mean, I hate to say we're going to be celebrating 300 years next year, but it's just not the same New Orleans. It drove a lot of the people out that gave it character. A lot of the spirits that, benevolent spirits that were there to protect from other spirits, because there's always voodoo going on. And I say voodoo, but the voodoo religion, but there's always hoodoo being practiced. Somebody's doing something to somebody all the time. And you've got all this other stuff, cemetery tours, Bourbon Street. It's just like, my daughter is sensitive. She really has some medium qualities going on. She just doesn't want to develop them. But when we go down there now, she'll get sick. She gets physically ill, and she says, "I just want to leave." Because we used to just ride around, just to take her out around the city, especially because she was in the Navy. So we just go. She can't do it anymore because the energy is just so off balance, and it's such a shame to see, to see that happen. I've got
a number of friends who are sensitive and aren't particularly either interested in developing it or very good at shielding. And they have a similar thing. Like they can't be, especially any of the main centers of the city, that just can't be there anymore.
I know. And it's like, the New Orleans that was, I mean, I'm older than you. I was born way back. I remember, how New Orleans got the way that it was, the bohemian culture, and the diversity and everything. Now is everything. It's like two separate cities. It was like that didn't exist. Like, she's a ghost now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're like vampires just sucking off of her. But it's very real, and anyone who's experienced that, has been to the city since then can tell it. But what are you doing now? I know you've got a bunch of books out, which if you find her on Amazon, you can just go get your books. But you working on any new projects, or is there a new maybe a show or something in development?
Well, I've done a couple of things with the Paranormal Lockdown people. Katrina Weidman, of course, is another Paranormal State alum like me, and Nick Groff came from Ghost Adventures, and don't hold that against him. Yep, I said it. But since Paranormal
they were
State,
cute to look at. Okay, come on. I mean,
well, and they serve a purpose. They're entertaining.
Turn down the sound and say things.
I designed a tarot deck since then, and that's out and available. You can poke around at it on my website. It's the Watcher Angel Tarot Deck.
Cool.
Definitely not your grandma's angels. Not the cute pooty or little silly ones.
Little cherubs,
no cherubs.
No cherubs. I've been writing a fiction series, which was a lot of my way of contextualizing some of the experiences with Paranormal State and with other hauntings that, like, I know you ladies know, like those things that you go through that you really can't talk about to anybody and have them not look at you like you're completely insane.
Mm-hmm.
Even people who are in the field, like the real stuff, the stuff that is too real. And I needed to get it out some way, so I created a character in a world that's just half a step off of this one, and he's psychic and immortal, and very much his experiences of energy and of psychic stuff. That's all what I go through. That's all how I see it. That's all how it manifests to me. And that's the Shadow Side series. First book's Conspiracy of Angels. The next one, the third one of the series, is coming out at the end of this month. It's called The Resurrection Game.
Cool.
It's gritty urban fantasy. It's set in Cleveland. Think of it as paranormal noir. So, cops and detectives and mysteries and magic, vampires and immortals and conspiracies that go back over millennia.
Wow.
And this poor sap has got to try to figure it all out.
Good luck with that. This poor sap right here who's trying to figure it out
Yeah.
too. No, and so that's available. You've had some other books though in the Shadow Side, right? That's
I've got Dictionary of Demons, which came about partly because of a conversation with Father Bob about doing exorcisms, and the fact that he needs names, and sometimes they'll give him names and he doesn't know what those names are, and he doesn't have all the resources of the Vatican Library. You can't just go fly out there all the time. So I compiled 1,500 plus names from a whole bunch of different sources. Between the 14th century and 18th century, primarily Western Christian occultism, anything that was named as a demon, fallen angel, evil spirit, it got stuck in the book with a whole lot of citations and where it came from.
That's a lot of research.
Well,
it was fun.
They actually, it was, and if you're anything like me, it's like, oh, and I got to go here. Oh, I got to go there. I just love historical research, but I've found, and several people have commented on this, that there was angelology in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. How many angels can fit on the head of a pin? But by far, there was more of a focus on demonology, which is another thing that's another bastardized term. A lot of people call themselves demonologists out there today, and they don't even know what the definition is. Someone who studies demons, not someone who goes and throws demons out of a house, But I mean, you can be that and do that, but a lot of people are presenting themselves as that are not. But by far, you'll find more names of devils and all about Persian sorcery and all about this other stuff, And if you
pretty much if they haven't heard of, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
They haven't heard about the Solomonic tradition, like the Lesser Key of Solomon or something like that, they're not a demonologist worth their salt. If they don't know what a goetic demon is, they're not a demonologist worth their salt.
You mentioned, and I was on your site and I was looking, and you mentioned the Heptameron, and I actually have the book, but it's by Joseph Lazinski. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a physicist, and he was like a pupil or an acolyte of Israel Regardie, and he was he was like an atheist and a complete skeptic, and he basically he found the Heptameron and just that book, and he did everything. He took it like just like a chemistry experiment. Put this, do that. He did it, and it worked. And whenever anybody says to me, "I know such thing as demons. I don't know what you're talking about. That's all movies and all," I said, "Find this book, study it, and go do that. And if you come back and tell me that they're not real, because there's a good chance, 90-something% chance you won't be here, like for next week or whatever, which is very serious. But I was glad to see that you agreed with that. The ritual, and what it is, and what it can contact that's kind of like, it was the fourth book of Agrippa, but it was kind of like set aside as, once you get through those three, now you can do this thing, now maybe you can try this. But I always throw it out to skeptics saying, okay, yeah, go do that, and then tell me, that you don't believe in it or that it's not real. So, but Dean, is Joe turned up yet? Our man in the... Okay, well, we'll just keep talking if that's all right with Michelle, unless she has
totally
to go.
Fine with me. I got a little bit of time still.
Good. Well, Dean, you got anything else? I know that I've talked
now he's saying he's here. Okay.
Oh, he's here. You see?
Now he's here.
He put that po' boy down. I know what Joe's doing. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you go.
Thank you.
I'm going to be in Ohio, actually, sometime next year. So maybe I could just Maybe I could just stand in front of your house and look at it. I don't know.
Oh,
I might
well,
just
no, let
send
me
you a
know.
line.
Let me know.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
be
be down
talking.
in NOLA December for a friend's wedding, and we're planning on being down for a couple of days to just
Oh,
kind of kick
cool.
around.
Well, we'd love
So
to have you
yeah.
back on the show at some point. And I'm so glad that you took the time to be with us. I was really impressed, Dean. You did, yeah. We have some,
Oh, thank you.
you're our special guest. So,
Mhm.
Yeah,
I'm
just
sure, you put a lot of underscoring to what we talk about. How much danger there is, and it all seems fun and games. Until somebody ends up, whatever, sucked on under,
yes.
in a grave or whatever. But we thank you for being here. You have a great weekend. Have fun tomorrow.
Yep, I will.
All
Thank you.
righty.
It's been a delight.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Michelle.
Michelle.
Have a good
Yep.
one. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
y'all take good. Bye.
You too. Bye bye. All right. That was excellent. I could talk to her for hours and hours and hours,
Mm.
but I know we got a break. So we are going to do that. We're going to take a little break. You are listening to the Supernatural Substation on the United Public Radio Network, and we'll be back. So don't go anywhere. We are live. Sorry for that dead air, but hey, we're back in the Supernatural Substation just for a little bit. I hope you've been listening to our guest, Michelle Bellinger. What do you think, Dean?
She is
Great guest.
awesome.
She is
Yes.
awesome. I was like kind of like nervous in the beginning, but but she's one of the first people that I've ever seen explain, the difference between psychic vampire or astral or whatever spirits and all the and she knows all the folklore obviously, so
Hmm.
so she's a great guest. I mean, hopefully she'll come back in the future,
Yeah.
because we unlike other shows, we like to have our people back. That's a good way to have a rapport. So anyway, but we're almost going to wrap up here. You're going to have that evidence from the radio show. I mean, the radio investigation, the station,
Yeah.
at some time
Coming
in
up
the future.
sometime. Yeah.
So you think
Behind like,
what I'm saying, could we have some EVPs
oh
on it
yeah.
sometime? Yeah,
Yeah.
in the future. So
Sure.
yeah, Dean does it all by herself, because
Most of the time.
I don't live near her. I would help, but yeah, Dean's. So we will have that, which sounded like a fun thing. And anyway, so I guess we're gonna wrap it up. And what do we have? Like 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Um, I did get invited to the Romance Writers of America conference next October in Cleveland.
Awesome.
Judy McDonough, Judy McDonough, author of the Bayou Secret Saga, great books. Go look for it. We like it. Amanda and I both like it, and you should read it, Dean, if you feel like it. But anyway, she's a member of that organization and asked me to come and speak. That's a whole year away, So, but I am going to be doing that next year if I'm around. If the
That's
world doesn't
awesome.
end, or a spaceship doesn't fall on our heads or whatever. So I'm also, I mean, I'm glad that, well, tonight we got into a little bit of the folklore and stuff, and the
Hmm.
stuff that is behind why this is dangerous, why you could end up in a bad situation if you don't know what you're doing. So so that's good. And I also wrote a book about stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
it's it's available on my website, ElleenFastanio.net. It's called Risks, Incidental, Supernatural Dangers of Paranormal Exploration. Then you can also buy Haunting Tales of Old New Orleans there at my.net. Look for new stuff there. It's like I was saying, I have to cycle through all this tech stuff, and basically do this, do that. Um, so anyway, if you've got something that needs to be kicked out of your house, or you've got a haunting or whatever, and you want to call somebody, who are you going to call?
Gonna
You
call
call
me.
Bernadine, Ghostbusters. So how do they get in touch with you, though?
They can get in touch with me on my website, www.lspr-society.com, or email me directly, Bernadine, Bernadine, at lspr-society.com.
Get on.
Or find me on
Bernadine.
Facebook.
Oh, yeah. And I wanted to say the news clip of Bernadine's investigation of KBON is on our Facebook page. I'm gonna upload it to the YouTube page as well. Facebook, The Supernatural Substation. YouTube, The Supernatural Substation. Our archives are going there as soon as possible after we do them. So go catch it. Half lit. You look kind of creepy there in the half light. So, and
Yeah.
I'm sure
The
that's how
the spirits help me look that way.
yes, that's how the dark lady likes it. So
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, if you're looking for me, I'm all over the place. I'm being told by people I'm all over the place. If you're looking for me for the paranormal, though, go to my Facebook page. I have an author page, and please go and like our Substation page. And please go and follow us and like us, subscribe on YouTube. There's going to be some fun things coming up. We're going to be having profiles and videos that we like and stuff like that. So new things are happening. So keep it here. Same bat time, same bat cave. What you got to say, Z? I mean, yeah, right. That's right. I mean, that's what he said. All right. Anyway, so you have been listening to us. We're going to be out of here. We'll be back next week with another new guest and some more commentary and some more sideshow stuff like we're doing. Stay tuned. Keep it right here for Kathy Bilski and Quantum Leap. She's getting high and going into the ozone. Also remember that United Public Radio is an iHeartRadio partner, so you can find our stuff there. And later tonight, Terminus, because of the dog incident and ate my cord, I couldn't create a new one, so I pulled up an archive that I like, and I have kind of forgot what it is. No, I'm sorry. It's At the Mountains of Madness, based on the H.P. Lovecraft story of the same name. 2 a.m., stay up, get creeped out, stay up till the sun comes up. Have a great one, everybody. Say goodnight, Bernadine.
Night, night.
Good night, y'all.